Well, guys, I hate to beat a dead horse and keep talking. First of all, I would never beat a dead horse. I don't care if there's an animal alive or dead. I'm not going to beat on it. A lot of humans I may beat on, but other than that, animals are safe in my book. Electrical problem. Had an electrician out, and I'm going to just go over this briefly once again. Had an electrician out, and a couple of them actually, and most of them kept blaming it on the railroad tracks, so the best thing to do was find somebody that was on the railroad. Well, luckily enough, a friend of mine, Tom, which used to be the commander with the Coast Guards, said, gee, there's a guy at our club that's an electrician for the railroad. And he's licensed, and he does work on the side because he has his own business. See, what a lot of these electricians do is they'll get a job at a good place like railroads, UI companies, and so on and so forth, to get the benefits and keep their licensing up, and yet they own their own business on the side. So that's what a lot of them do. Even with the fire department, there's a couple of guys that are with the fire department that are licensed electricians. But anyway, he came out and he says, it's not the railroad. He says, but? He says, but I think it is, and I think I told you about the grounds on the sub panels. So I says, well, I know for a fact that that's what I did. I followed the lead from the main panel into the other panels, not realizing on your sub panels the copper, the bare wire, has to be isolated from the white, and the white isolated from the box, so that your black is on your breakers, your white is on your strip, which is supposed to be isolated from the box, so you want to make sure that it is, and then your bare wires get grounded to the box. You can just do that by adding another strip, or in my case, I just drilled a hole and put a nut and bolt through it just to get it done. So anyway, I had done all that. After I've done all that, I still had the problem. Meaning, if I put 12 volts here to there, on the power side 12, negative side on the table saw, which is AC, the bulb would light. Okay, so as I was saying, I isolated the wires. So the bare wire is now grounded to the case, the box itself, on all the boxes out here. So that's done. The white wire is on the terminal strip, which I checked with a meter to make sure that it was isolated from the box. And then the black naturally go to the breakers. So it's almost as if I take all the wires, twist them together, and put a cap on them. That's basically what it is. And the same with the grounds, or the bare wire. Take them all, twist them together, put a cap on it. So because all the grounds are connected and connected to ground, all the whites are connected and connected to nothing except themselves, basically. And then the blacks are connected to the box. So that was done. When that was done, I still had the problem, as I was saying. So I called a friend of mine, a plumber, Eddie, great kid, and I call him a kid. I mean, he's probably in his 40s. But I said, I need an electrician, and I know he had a good electrician because I worked with him at one time. I had to dig a trench so they could put some power in, and he called him up. Marcus is his name, and he came out, and he says, Now, the problems that I was having with people was they come out here and they come back here, and they want to start checking back here. You know, and I tell them that this isn't the problem. I had the problem before this even existed. The problem originates in here, before all this wiring was done. I said, so we have to ignore from here back, because that didn't exist. I didn't even think about that when I was having the problem here. What do? They end up coming back here again. Now, because I'm getting this negative ground on the DC side off of this battery, they all tend to go over here. Now when I say all, I said all the electricians, because I had like 3 or 4 of them out here. And they go here and they come to this little battery setup and they're trying to figure out what it is. So they disconnect here, which is fine. This cable here, the red one, and this black one go basically across, and they're isolated. They're connected to the battery. That's it. So what they want to do is they want to start disconnecting all the grounds off the batteries. Well, if you disconnect those two, you've isolated everything. But they want to come over here and start disconnecting all the grounds behind the radios, all the grounds up in there. Well, by disconnecting those two, you've disconnected all that. And I'm not going to start going through all this. That's 2 days of setup. So I tell them, listen, again, please, it has nothing to do with back here. Because, well, it didn't. Let's put it this way. So, get them out here, they start looking. They look underneath, they look under, and they all tend to go back to here again. Hey! So then, all right, you know what? I'm not going to argue with these guys. I'm just going to let them do what they got to do. All right? So that's what he's doing. So we started disconnecting, reconnecting, moving, changing, swapping, jumping up and down, holding hands, you know, square dancing, eating, drinking, you know, whatever you want to call it. And Marcus took a wire off over there. And when he did, this went off. It shut down. I said, whoa. So what wire does that wire feed? Well, that one wire, believe it or not, fed a plug back here. It's a single plug by itself, 4-banger. Boom, done. Well, that's strange because that plug was not there when I was having this problem, again, out front. Originally, before all this was added, again, it was out there. And that's where I was having the problem. Had nothing to do with back here because this back here wasn't here. Alright? Anyway, we unplug everything from that plug. He hooks up the wire. And we didn't have anything, so it was good. So basically, it's normal when there's nothing plugged in. So he says to me, what about the power supply? I said, well, the power supply is basically brand new. I bought it, but I haven't been using it. I think I used it twice for a few hours because I used the battery most of the time. I said, so I really don't use the power supply. And again, I bought it new, what, 8 months ago maybe? You guys would probably know. I should check my videos. And at that point, this is, you know, I don't see anything here that would cause it. So we started plugging things back in, one at a time. As soon as I plugged in the power supply, bingo, the problem occurred again. So he says, you got a problem with your power supply. I go, well, yeah. He says, now I understand that part of it. However, there's got to be a second problem because this was happening before this existed. So now it's only making it harder for me to explain to them to ignore what was going on back there because I had the problem here when the table saw used to be here. Well, we still have the problem. Now, the problem being is that when this power supply is plugged in, the short is on the table saw. Okay, so what do we do here? Well, first we put a lock washer on this. Hold on a minute, guys. Yeah, just look at whatever it is you're looking at. Look at it for a minute. Thank you. this. Put this. That is the power, right? Yep, it's marked with the plus sign. And this. And this. Alright, so anyway, I was just going to start working on checking out this power supply. I said, wait a minute, before I start ripping it into it, let me just disconnect the cables, which I had done, and then I plugged it in, and everything was still fine. So that's telling me that the power supply is okay, because it's fine. And it's fine until I hook up those cables. Now those cables are connected to over here. And if I plug it in now, I will have voltage on that saw. So basically, it's only on that one circuit. Now I have to figure out what the problem is that what did I have out there to cause the same problem? Because every time, like I said, this is like 4 electricians. This one actually found this problem, which, okay, helps me to a point to identify what the problem is. The first thing he thought was, okay, the power supply is bad, and that's it. Which, that's not it. Because power supply is not bad. I was going to call up Antron and start, or Astron rather, and Astron, and get into it with them. But anyway, this problem occurred before this back was even installed, and everybody that comes in here doesn't listen to that. Everyone that comes in here automatically goes to the easiest part, which is the breaker box over there, and they start talking back here. I said, no. I says, you guys got to remember, this started when the saw was over there before any of this was here. So why are we looking here when this wasn't here when I had the problem? The problem followed me here. Okay, so, but again, they never listen. You know, they just want to go. Now, how the hell did that happen? What happened here? How am I losing paint for no reason? That's stupid. That shouldn't be happening. Alright. There goes $50 down the drain. Actually, more than that. I gotta find another bucket. Huh. That just started. That wasn't there a few minutes ago. That is the... I don't remember if that was the living room or the kitchen. Anyway, I gotta get a bucket, get that paint in there. So the problem has started in there. Let me take care of that bucket. It's gonna drive me nuts. I mean, whatever I lose, I can just use it on the floor anyway. It doesn't make a difference. I'll just roll it around. That's just the floor in the shop here. It's not like it's in the house. However, that paint was like $34 a gallon. And there's, I think, 3 gallons in there. So why is it leaking? My hand's full of paint. Sorry guys. Let me go wash my hand off. Hey buddy, how you doing? Huh? How you doing? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll have to edit a lot of that out. Excuse me. So anyhow, as I was saying, the guy that was here the other day, good guy. I mean, he started looking. The problem being, though, was he still continued to look at that being the problem because he can stand there and work on it. When he tried to get under here, he didn't stay down there for long other than just look. If we disconnect that from there totally, that means the outside power is disconnected. And the only thing coming in here is the old power. I showed him that. He still goes back here. That is new power. I just disconnected that totally from the shop. All that power back there was off. All the power that was new coming in here is off. The only power in here is the old power. We still had the problem. Oh yeah, but boom, there it is. Okay, they don't want to. They don't understand this. Why don't they understand this? Because their eyes are seeing one thing, and that's it. They're blind from everything else. So he finds the problem back here with the power supply. Well, I told him originally, yes, you're going to find the problem in the new stuff. Because it's going from the old into the main breaker in the house, and whatever's tied into that, it's going to follow it out, which means it comes out back here on the new side, because the new side is connected to the same breaker in the house. Well, not the same breaker, but the same box, the same 200 amp service. Now, these guys aren't stupid. But sometimes they let their eyes talk to them and not their brains. You have to remember theory and Ohm's law, regardless of what it is. If I have a main box here and I have a problem here, I connect the old to that, and then I connect the new to that, I'm going to have that problem. If I disconnect the new, it's disconnected, so therefore naturally it's not going to be the problem, but the problem is still here. Now, if the problem may not even be there, it may be here on the old side, but it's going to go back into that, and whatever connects to that, meaning the new, it's just going to go in and follow that and everything else. So he just couldn't grasp that. I disconnected this completely from the house, the new stuff. So this was all the old stuff that's been here since the house was built. The problem's still there. So it's not this. Now, he did find a problem, but that problem occurred because of this problem made that problem. It blew that up, just like it blew up that radio. Remember, I had to send that radio back to Yezu? And it went back to him twice. It blew up the USB ports on this computer. I mean, it blew them right out. I don't know why they don't see this. Well, they don't see it because they see the new out here. So that's assuming that's what it is. Now again, the guy was a good guy. I got nothing against him. I hire him. You know, his prices were right. He was really fair. I even told him if he needed some digging done, he's got a little bit of a problem in his property where when it rains, he gets a little bit of extra water in a spot that he doesn't want it. So he wants to put a little drain there. You know, so he asked me if I dig. I said, yeah. You know what? If you want, I'll come out. I ain't gonna charge you. I'll just come out and I'll dig it up for you. Don't worry about it. So, I mean, he's a good guy. I got nothing against him. However, he does what everybody else does. They fail to listen to the problem. Yeah, I don't know how many times I tell them. If I put up a wall and you didn't see this didn't exist to you, would it be any easier? Because this is what I'm trying to explain to them. I'm sure you guys understand. Why don't they? This problem occurred before all this was out here. Before. When I was working in this part of the shop, I had the problem. Now I do have a video, I believe, on that problem out here. But I don't know if I had done anything with it as far as panning to show that, well, I wouldn't have thought of it because that wasn't there, so I wasn't even thinking about it. But did I walk around like I am now, all right, to where this may have been visible to show that that wasn't there when the problem was here? Because this is where I found the problem originally when the table saw used to be here. And again, none of that was built. So that tells me that it's nothing to do with those panels. Right? And they just don't see that. They come in, you start them here, and they all go back here. All right, well, where's the box for this? Box for this used to be in the attic, I tell them. I moved it down here. Used to be 2 screw-in fuses. I made it a breaker, and I moved it down here. I show it to them. Okay. Well, what feeds that back there? Well, what feeds that back there is the box that's under there. I said it feeds that back there and a couple of new plugs over here on the wall. One there and one there. Where do they go? They go back here. Okay, this is the problem. It's back here someplace. It isn't back here. Yeah, I mean, it drives me nuts because these guys are not, well, you don't know how they got their license. I have to assume that they took the test, and they probably did. I'm not saying anything other than that. However, they may not have, what's the word I'm looking for, worked the test. They may have just studied the test, meaning the answers, because basically when you take a test, they're giving you the answers. So all you have to do is basically study. I mean, that's like ham radio now. You know, you can get your extra, like bam, without even knowing anything about radio. Because all you have to do is study the 250 questions. You're going to get 50 of them. All right, and you only need like a 70% grading. So, hello. You know, you don't know anything about the theory of what you actually studied. All you do is studied the questions and the answer. Well, not even the questions, because you don't know what the questions were going to be. There's 250 questions, naturally 250 answers. If you study them, that's all you need to do. Now, you don't know what you studied and what they mean. All you know is this mean true or false? Well, yeah. Apples fall down? True. True, all right? You know, simple. Is red red? True. You know, I mean, basically that's it. But, you know, you don't know anything about why red is red or why the apple hits the ground. You know, and I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, that's where I'm at. Now, I don't mean to bore you guys with this. It's just that it really pisses me off sometimes when people that are educated, you know, and know what they're doing, don't listen to the problem. They automatically go by what their eyes tell them, you know, instead of listening to what the problem is. So, anyway, that's where I'm at. So I know that it's not the power supply because I just disconnected it and plugged it in and everything's fine. So it's still in the 110 side. Now it's back here because it's following the loop. Like I say, if I put another plug out in the garage, out in the back someplace, hanging on a pole, it's going to have the problem because where am I connecting it to? I'm connecting it to the same problem. You know? So, alright. I'm going to sit here and think about it for a while. Now, I want to tear all this apart, but I don't want to because I really don't think that any of this is the problem. Now, we even disconnected because what I did have in common, so let's talk about that for a minute. What I did have in common with here and back here is the wind turbine and the solar panel. However, they're not tied in. They are just tied into the batteries. The batteries are tied into 12 volts only. So the DC is totally isolated from the AC. You know, it's not like I have the wind turbine and the solar panels feeding into the AC of the house. They're coming in strictly 12 volt into the batteries. So everything over here, when I go to 12 volt, is 12 volt. When I go to battery, I'm on battery. That's all there is to it. So any questions? How about any answers? How about that? Now let me go through this one more time so that you know what I'm talking about. If I can do it without getting interrupted. The wife's home for a long weekend, so I actually do want to spend some time with her. I don't want to spend all day in here, but at the same token, this is important, as my wife is. All right, main panel in the house, 200 amps. All the breakers. We got a 50 amp breaker down here. Coming out of that, both sides, we're coming up into, I'm sorry, one side. It's not 220. One side coming up. Oh, we got a vessel in distress. That's the Coast Guard side. Alright, so anyway, this goes into a 6 UF cable, underground direct bury, out to the shop, and it goes into another box, which is underneath the counter back there. Under counter. Okay, and that has 4 breakers in it. And what I did with that, we have naturally the black going into the breakers. We have black. We have the white, which is going off to the strip. And we have the bare, which is actually grounded right to the box. Two box. So that's grounded right to the box. So all three of these are isolated from one another. Now, from here, I put on a small 50 amp breaker, again here, and the wires are following. So off of this black goes into here. Off of this white goes into here, and this to there. So this is following through. The white, the black, and the bare are not connected to one another in any way. All three are isolated. The old side goes over, and it used to go into the attic to a couple of screw-ins. I took those out and put a box there that has two breakers on it. And that feeds the original old wire that's been in this house since 1962. This goes into, this 50 amp breaker goes back to here into the shop breaker box. And again, it's wired the same. This is the shop, rear shop, I was like R-E-A-R, rear shop. This is the front shop. This one here is the front. And then all this naturally wires all this back here. So boom, 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 boom. That's all these plugs and everything you see around here. This is the old shop. Again, old / front shop. When I had this saw in the old shop, let's separate these. New, old. New, old. When I had the saw in the old shop, table saw, blade, alright, table saw, in the old shop, this had negative DC. Now how do I know that? Because there's a stud here, that had a battery, and this was a battery, 12 volt DC battery right here, and this had a negative and a positive post on it. One day I was working on something and I had the positive side hooked up, and when it touched the saw, it sparked. So, oh, that shouldn't have happened. It's hooked up to the battery. That's it. So I put a meter on it. Come to find out, I had DC voltage from the positive side of the battery to the negative side, or the tabletop of the saw, which was the negative side. This didn't have the power on it. This had the negative on it. Couldn't figure out what it was. I ran extra grounds and everything else. Couldn't figure out what it was, so I just put a switch on it. So I shut it off when I wasn't using it. because I didn't see any other problems, because none of this was back here. This was all gone. This wasn't here yet. So that's what the problem seemed to be at the point, was here. Forgetting all about that, because it was no longer a problem, because the only time I turned it on was when I had the switch, you know, the regular wall switch. So at that point, that just didn't occur to me to be a problem anymore, because everything else seemed to be running just fine. I built this back here. Again, not even thinking about it. Like I say, it's out of mind. Until I go to work on something on the table saw back here where it is now. And the same thing happened. So, oh shit. Now, in the old shop, I didn't have all this radio equipment and computers. All it was basically, you know, like just a little tinker shop. You know, everything else, there was nothing there. No radios, no computers. Just a little 12-volt battery source that if I needed something 12-volt to work on something, you know, I had it there. You know, because I tinker. So I wasn't even thinking about that. I come back here, it's fine. I mean, I got the problem now. Oh shit. So now I come over here. Now this computer that's up here, the Acer, used to be here. One day I went to plug in these USB ports over here. When I plugged it in, it made such a pop and blew that out, right, that it blew the USB ports in this computer. So the computer turns on and it works. There's just no USB ports. They're all blown out. Blew it right out. Now, this radio, that's a remote head. The chassis of the radio is down here, right? I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's right there. That's it right there with the two wires coming out of it. That's the chassis. That's just a voltmeter that's showing that I have 15 volts here. But other than that, that's just a chassis, which is bolted to the bracket, which is bolted to a piece of wood. And it's grounded through the 12-volt ground and the 12-volt power off those batteries over there that I showed you earlier. Well, I was unscrewing the PL259 connector from the back of this chassis, and when I did, I got spanked across my arms because my arms touched the chassis while I was touching the connector. So basically, I had voltage on a PL259 connector that's only connected to an antenna outside. It's not connected to the ground, it's not connected to aluminum siding, it's not connected to anything. It's just connected to an antenna that is outside on the roof of the shop, which is not connected to anything in the shop. It's just bolted on a small tripod sticking on the roof. So I go out there and I hook up a bunch of grounds coming off the antenna right into the ground, and that made the voltage higher. So right now, the only voltage or ground strap that I have is the one that's in the earth on the main in-house 200 amp breaker panel. That does have an earth ground. That's the only ground. On the garage, I used to have one in all four corners. The antenna, I had that grounded to the chain link fence that goes around the whole property, so we know that was grounded. As I disconnected the grounds, the voltage on this started to become lower, to where I can screw it in without getting shocked. Now this is all originated from the old shop. It's just back feeding into and then back out of. Or is it coming from here to start with? Now this used to be a 60 amp service. We called an electrician in here when we bought the house, and we had him upgrade it to 200 amp service. So when he did that, naturally he checked everything. You know, we weren't going to put power in here if it didn't need it, or couldn't hold it, let's put it that way. But he checked everything, and everything was the, what do you call that cable? It's the stiff. It's like the metal cable with the wire inside. You know what I mean. So the whole house is that. So it wasn't a big deal. He says your wiring's fine. It'll take it. No, don't even worry about it. You know. I told him, we want to change it all. We'll change it all. He says you don't have to change it all. Don't worry about it. Nothing to worry about. So we didn't. Now I'm thinking if there was a problem here at the time, he should have seen it. That's what I was thinking anyway. Now, originally, the wire that was going from the house to the garage, the old shop, used to be 2 overhead wires. 1, 2. No grounding, just 2 wires. And I says, I can't have overhead wires there because I have things coming in and out, and I'm just going to tear them down. So I cut them off. And I replaced all that with underground direct bury. I put in 12-3, which goes to this breaker box here, which used to be this overhead wire. And now that comes down right up, rather, from underground direct bury up to the attic, over to this breaker box. So from here to here, it's all new, direct bury underground, where it used to be overhead. So that's the only thing I've changed. That should not have anything to do with it. If anything, it made it better. And it's all new wire, because if you guys remember right, about 2 months ago, we had some good weather, maybe a little bit longer than that now. So I says, I'm going to start digging it up. Spring is here. It was mid-March, maybe. You know, it was a nice day. So I started digging it all up. I dug it all up, and then what did it do? It snowed, the ground froze, and everything else. So I had a mess out there with a trench dug in it for like 3 weeks before I was able to run all the new wire. So I ran all the new wire. So that's all brand new wire. And it's all direct bury. This stuff here. Now this is actually heavier. I ran 12-3. I think this is 10. But and then the one feeding this panel is 6. So there's a 12-3 coming in on the old side. The new side is 6. And that comes into all this. And again, that's all new underground. So if anybody has any questions, ask, and I'll do a video again so you get an idea. If anybody can be of any help, I'd appreciate it. Because, like I say, I'm going to disconnect all this here just to make sure and to prove to the people that may come that this has nothing to do with it. Now, I'm going to be out of service for a while. I will have the computer, but I'm not going to be on the radio or anything. But at that point, that's where we're at. Because, again, it started back here. Well, up front now, okay? Where the original problem was. This here was never here. This used to be a wall, an outside wall. This was all its own little garage. This was what it was. The problem was here. Before any of that was wired in and built, and before that down underneath there, which I don't know if you can see it or not, was there. The only thing that was changed was the wire coming in from overhead to underground. That's the only changes I made to the old system. So I am open for suggestions. And please, I don't want to take up a lot of your time, so I don't want you to stay here and bat your head. But at the same token, I've said everything over and over and over again in this video. So if you want, you know, you can always zoom back and zoom forward. If you want, I don't know. Don't even bother. If you haven't got the time, I really don't want to bother you guys. But this is puzzling. And I can't get an electrician here that looks beyond this new building. As soon as they come in, I talk to them about the problem, And I started them out here, right from the beginning, telling them I brought 2 new cables underground. One of them goes up that piece of conduit right there in the corner. That's the old, which is all new, but that's the old shop. I brought in new wire underground. There's a junction box there. Came up here. Used to go into the attic to break to fuses. I took those out and I put a box in here. Other than that, everything else coming out of that box is the original wire that's in the shop. I didn't change any of the wiring. What do? Oh, then I tell them this is where the problem started, right here. When I used to have the table saw here. Now, is it hard for them to envision the saw being here? I don't know. What do? They walk back here. Well, what's all this? What's feeding all this? Well, I got a breaker box over there that feeds all this, but that's a totally separate circuit. And I had the problem before that. They don't even hear that. Boom, that's where they go. So, anyway, I still got the problem. And that's about where I'm at. And I wasted 37 minutes. I'm going to try to edit this down a little bit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this. I just got long-winded because it's driving me nuts. And what drives me nuts more so is the 3 electricians or 4 electricians, I don't remember now, that I had out here. 2 of them or 3 of them kept blaming it on the power lines on the track, that it was coming in through the airwaves. These are licensed technicians or electricians, you know. Now, I'm not a licensed electrician, but I am a considered, well, it was at one time a licensed technician. You know, I used to work on this shit, both AC stuff and DC stuff, but never this stuff. I'm just a homeowner working on this stuff, you know. But at that point, that's where I'm at, guys. Anybody got any help? I'm open.